everybody. So hopefully we coped a little bit with the delay. I'm still getting better at timing that. Welcome back to Secular Literary Circle. This is now episode 3 for chapter 3 of Bart Ehrman's book. If you guys have missed the prior episodes, it's going to be getting its own playlist very, very soon. I made one. Knock was like, y'all don't have enough episodes for that yet, and took it down. Once we have 5 episodes, he's gonna let me make a playlist. Something about not liking to see, like, an incomplete playlist and, like, a short line on the page, OCD stuff. I don't understand it, but it's his thing, and I believe him when he says it bugs him.
Well, yeah, it can bug him, but people like know what's coming next. They're excited. We're on chapter 3. We're almost kind of getting started to get there.
Started to get there. I love that.
Yeah, like we put on Twitter last night. You know, we're just right past the starting line.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've done so much. So. Yeah.
And it really does. It really does feel that way, which, by the way, we had Dr. Josh on the channel earlier, and I let him know that we had given, like, heaps of praise to Digital Hammurabi as a source last week when we were talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh and the way that it handles death and such, and he was quite happy to hear about that. I'd love to have him on again sometime if we end up dealing with a book that deals primarily with Sumerian or Canaanite mythology in any way, because it'd be great to have a guest on.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Josh, I mean, he's all right.
That is an understatement.
I mean, I know some. I mean, you know, he don't want to come at me with like New Testament, but have fun with your Assyriology, Dr. Josh.
So
also, love you, man.
If you notice, by the way, I got us a brand new background. We now have a library and as our background instead of just a little cosmic thing. I've got my little logo there in the corner for the short term, but I'm actually going to be talking to Gaelic Nox about getting us a pile of books with the 3 of us sitting on it as our logo going forward, if nobody has any objections to that.
I love it.
Can they be Bibles?
Some of them.
You know, it could put, maybe it could be like a Bible and then a couple of the Apocrypha.
Well, I mean, I figure that there are so many different translations of the Bible and interpretations that, you know, we just make a mountain and be like, now which one's correct? We'll just choose that one.
So many Bibles.
So, yeah.
So
I think Gilgamesh should be in there personally.
For sure, yeah.
Gilgamesh does need to be in there, and maybe the Iliad needs to be in there too.
Yes.
The Iliad, the Odyssey. Right?
The Odyssey is great.
Man, it's super long.
This is going to be like a 10-book pile of books by the time we're done.
Right.
It's just
all these suggestions.
It's just so important, you know, that people understand that I don't just talk about the New Testament, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do, but
it's not all.
That I have a wide range. Like the other day, I think movies, right, where people were like really, and sports, where people were really surprised that I know they're like, how do you know about sports? And I'm like,
he's
I'm
a sports
from
nerd.
Nebraska. There's literally nothing else there.
Right.
We talked about in our first episode, we talked about the Huskers like being played in frickin' grocery stores and stuff over the radio. Like, it's absolutely nuts down there. Because I'm not from there, but I lived there for 2 years, so I got a feel for the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's Norfolk, not Norfolk.
That's correct. That's I've lived there.
He taught me that.
So, like, now that we're done kind of going off in the weeds, last week we talked about the fear of death in ancient cultures. Susan gave her Susan version of the story of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh fears for his life, and then talks about how shitty the afterlife is with his friend, and kind of why Socrates was a badass for kind of coming to terms with a fear of the afterlife, because he's like, basically, even though our survival instincts tell us to be scared of dying, like, it's either not gonna matter because we don't exist, or we're probably not going to be punished if there is an afterlife. We'll just be moving on to a different state where, and then tongue-in-cheek, you know, you can't get killed for not being pious enough.
Right.
Yeah. Man.
Which brings us to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 kind of talks about the Homeric afterlife, particularly as portrayed in, if I recall correctly, the Iliad. Let me pull the actual document up really quick.
Yeah, the name of the chapter.
I think it's the Odyssey.
It does both.
Oh, it is the Odyssey.
Is life after death before there was life after death. I love Bart Ehrman's style of writing.
And I love the opening line, too.
Yes. And I've got I've got these things that are highlighted in there. obviously he has editors or whatever, but I don't give them any credit because editors, man, come on. I wrote what I wrote for a reason. His style of writing throughout this book has just been phenomenal. And of course I may have read ahead. I skimmed to chapter 8, which is, talking about like what they believed around time Jesus, whatever. Like looking at and reading up to this point, and then how he gets into stuff in this chapter, it's if people have not even read parts of this yet, it's definitely recommend.
Oh yeah, highly. So that first line that I really, really loved, it's like 2 lines, which I'm gonna go ahead and quote because I really, really love it. And I wrote it down.
Nice.
The fear of death for many people in antiquity differed from the terrors of torment or horrors of actual non-existence experienced by so many in the West today. It was instead the dread of losing out on everything a full life has to offer, everything that makes living pleasant. So it's just this general like blech or mech feeling was the best way that I sort of put it throughout my notes in this whole entire chapter.
That's also reflected in the report in the Epic of Gilgamesh from the prior, chapter, right? Like they talked about how basically, your wife and your sons ate dust. Whoa, they said, that sort of thing. This idea that all that is good in life just disappears in the afterlife, so you might as well enjoy it while you have it because your eternity is going to be boring.
Right.
Yeah, I like that he included that Edwin Rode quote. Nothing is so hateful as death and the gates of Hades. For when death comes, it is certain that life, this sweet life of ours in the sunlight, is done with, whatever else there may be to follow. And it is just, I'm depressed already. It's, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, it's just
I don't know. For us at least, there's, I'm gonna go to fucking hell apparently. For them, it was like it's just you'll see what kind of like how it's written in here, man.
Yeah, they're basically just shells of what they were on Earth. They can't experience any of the pain, but they can't experience any of the pleasure either. Yeah. So it's like this. It's not an existence. It's just a meh.
Yeah, I hope he gets into that.
Yeah. So the first section we really sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so we move on from this kind of idea of, okay, well, this is what the ancients were afraid of, to a more specific sort of discussion of the Iliad and the Odyssey. He opens up with a description of who Homer was said to be in antiquity, though I would like to take a note that this is who he's reported to be. We don't actually know where these stories originated from. They appear to be these epics that have been passed down, and Homer was just one of the first to write them down, but we don't even know if he was the first to write them down, or if he's kind of a mythological figure that was attributed to these things but may not have even been his own person.
Yeah. I have a vague remembrance of having to read the Iliad and the Odyssey in high school.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever actually did. What was the other one that we read? Gates of Fire?
Yeah, it's where it was where the red fern grows.
Oh God, no.
Did everybody had to read that, right?
I had to read that growing up, and it's just like rip my heart out and throw it out the window.
Yeah.
I don't read that anymore.
Right? But it's definitely the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah.
That, and then the Homer's epic, and there's other stuff. There's stuff like Heracles, and I read something. I had to read something from the hell's her name? Other Greek thing. I forget. Like the fall of Troy, I think. Or something like that.
Yeah.
You might have also had to read the Aeneid, but that's more Rome than Greece.
Yeah. It was like the seven sisters, something like that, and they're crying and some man. Like shit.
I don't remember much of high school.
Man, for Greeks being all like crazy and having all these parties, man, they did not have a positive view of death.
Well, and that's interesting because there were multiple views of death, and we'll get into this as we go along, because there were a bunch of different philosophical schools of thought. However, a lot of lay people were very heavily influenced by Homer, which he points out here.
Right.
Which, by the way, I would love to get my hands on the translation that he uses in here for these quotes, or see if he did his own, because some of these, like, this translation is extremely poetic, and there's some very crappy ones out there. A lot of us had to read the shitty ones growing up, and it really does a disservice to such a beautiful story.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't know.
So he says,
oh, by the way, sorry.
Yes.
He said, footnote 2, I am using the translation of Robert Fagel's The Iliad, New Penguin from 1990. The line numbers are those in this edition. So that's what he's using for anybody that wants to know that. There you go.
So he starts off. So he starts off by talking about what I just said, which is effectively we don't know who Homer is. We don't really know when these were composed. They think it's around the 8th or 9th century BC, but they're not sure. But like he then goes into this idea of, okay, well, death is a prominent feature in both of these stories. And he starts off with a very, very pretty quote that gets more pretty if you understand kind of what they were saying in Greek. But he says, a man's life breath cannot come back again. No raiders in force, no trading brings it back once it slips through a man's clenched teeth.
I wrote that down too.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Such a gorgeous quote. It really is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he talks about the life breath and stuff. And then I appreciate the question that he asks. He says, well, where does it go? Like, if the life breath is gone and our bodies are cold, right? And for Homer and other ancient Greek authors, it goes to the underworld, where souls, or the psyche, have the form but not the substance of humans, and none of the goodness.
Right.
So none of that, I think he even goes on to say you can't taste, and you don't really get and when he speaks about Achilles and stuff, right? Yeah. And he says, there is, it's a shell, I think you said that, right? Where it's just this wispy shell of a humanoid form. And again, Greeks, stop it.
Well, and he talks about the word for that, which is something that I've often pointed out when debating Christians about the existence of hell. He talks about the word image or shade, which is eidolon. And eidolon is actually the word used in the New Testament in Revelations when they're referring to, pagans and idolaters, etc. Like, it as much referred to, quote, pagan worship as it did ancestor worship. And there are at least some scholars that I've read that think that they were specifically condemning ancestor worship rather than, worship of other gods, which was interesting.
Little New Testament action.
New Testament, yeah!
Odysseus, though, man.
So I just want to do a minor little side note, because I thought this was really, really funny, because I'm a giant nerd.
No.
So there's a movie that Trey Parker and Matt Stone made whenever they were in film school at CU Boulder, called Cannibal the Musical. Which,
oh God.
It's amazing. It's about Alfred Packer, who was the United States' only convicted cannibal. So the story,
name.
I know, right? And it's not Alfred, it's Alfred.
Yeah, I know.
Alferd. It's a fictionalized account of what happened on their journey from Utah to California, or was intended to be their journey. And Trey Parker said in like the drunken commentary, they probably were aiming for the thumbs up. He says in the drunken commentary, I tried to incorporate as much of the Odyssey in this as possible, because he specifically incorporates a Cyclops in Cannibal the Musical.
Yeah.
He incorporates a prophet, specifically, that's like, you're doomed, you're doomed, you're doomed.
It's serious.
Yeah. And most of the main characters die.
Or Tiresias, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of that. I have not seen it.
It's great. I own it.
It is,
well,
it is well worth. It's well worth watching. And in fact, one of the quips from the movie is frequently referenced in my house. It's, have you ever been to Montana? And then it just like zooms out, and there's this guy walking on this big empty field. Hello? It's hilarious.
Love it.
But So getting back to the story of the Odyssey, he gives a sort of summary of Odysseus's trip to the Underworld. Basically, they end up sailing to the island of the enchanting nymph Circe. They explore the island a little bit. They run into Circe herself, or Circe, who turns a bunch of his men into pigs. One of them gets away and gets to warn Odysseus about it. He ends up eating the food that she gave him, but he's immune to it somehow.
Because of Hermes.
Hermes. Yeah.
Yes, because of Hermes. And she realizes that he's gotten some divine help and, tries to sleep with him, because apparently this is just how the myths worked back then. Like, the gods and goddesses tried to sleep with pretty much everybody.
It's true.
Sounds about right.
So he refuses her, because, his men are still, pigs, and he's not happy about that.
Very swiney.
So she ends up letting them go. He goes to bed with her. They, end up getting to enjoy hospitality. Odysseus has sex. They stay there for a year. And after that, they end up heading out to home. Before then, though, Circe instructs him to go to the House of the Dead and talk to Persephone, which, for anybody who are, familiar with Persephone, there's often this idea that she was kidnapped against her will and a whole bunch of other things. It's a lot more complicated than that, but she is the wife of Hades and effectively the judge of the dead in later versions of the afterlife. In earlier versions of the afterlife, she's kind of more the mitigating force on Hades. Like, she's the one who kind of often will let people into Hades to get their loved ones.
What fruit was it? She ate a fruit.
She ate a fruit?
Yeah.
She ate seeds from the pomegranate,
there it
6
is.
of them out of 12, and that's why she stays down there for 6 months out of the year. But it's not really implied whether she wanted to stay there or not. It was Demetra, her mother, that had a problem with the whole thing. So, there's a lot of messiness with that story that a lot of people misinterpret.
Yeah.
That's understandable. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot involved. Yeah.
Says there is no differentiation between the wicked and the righteous, religious and non-religious, valiant and coward, which Bart Ehrman just basically ripped off Aaron Burr, that death doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. So it takes and it takes, and we keep living anyway. We're gonna get copyright here.
Yeah, you're just gonna keep singing Hamilton the rest of the night. I mean, but that's nothing new.
I do.
That's very true.
So what ends up happening is she instructs him to go seek out the prophet Tiresias, who is himself fairly famous from a different part of the story, if I recall correctly. We get a very detailed and, again, very pretty quote from there. Consult the ghost of Tiresias, seer of Thebes, that the great blind prophet whose mind remains unshaken, even in death, Persephone has given him wisdom, everlasting vision to him and him alone. The rest of the dead are empty, flitting shades.
Yeah. That is also much like, so much of the stuff that we talked about in chapter 2. That's also really heavy.
Yeah.
To just think that you are just an empty husk of your former self. It's so, and you're basically like a shadow, essentially.
Yeah.
Hey, at this round table, what's up, Austin? What are you laughing at?
The husk thing.
Thank you.
And it took me a second, too.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I do what I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So once we end up getting into this scene where Odysseus heads down into the realm of the dead to find Tiresias, what he ends up doing is he, fills a bucket or a bowl with blood, and he calls up Tiresias to drink from it. And this is what brings him back, effectively, to consciousness, which mirrors a similar, rite that would happen on what was known as Triakas, or the Dark of the Moon. This is the Numeneos, or New Moon calendar, was sacred in Athens. There are evidence that it was used elsewhere, but in Athens we have a much more complete picture of it. Basically, the cycles of the moon would correspond to the months in the Greek calendar, and each of them had various rulers. We get a lot of information on this from Herodotus in Works and Days, and he talks extensively about which days of the lunar month are sacred. Triakas, being the dark of the moon, was sacred to Hecate, but it was also sacred to the ancestors. And what the Greeks would do is this thing called the Feast of the Ancestors, where a full meal would be prepared, the gods would get their offering, Hecate would get the bones and fat, as was customary, but also a full space would be set at the table with a full portion of food, and it would be dedicated to the ancestors in a rite very similar to this rite of drinking blood. The idea being that your ancestors could return to your home on that night and enjoy a moment of being human again, whether you knew them or not, through the spirit of this offering, in much the same way the gods were said to be sustained by the offerings of incense, which mimicked their divine food.
So then
that's cool.
What you're saying then is that it's not at all like Transformers Dark of the Moon.
Nothing is. Nothing is.
Man.
But it is, it's a similar sort of idea. Well, to me anyway, just because I've come from an area that has a heavy Hispanic population. It sounds a lot like Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah,
where it's like the day, the day that you put up on the altars and you're supposed to be able to have reverence for the dead and everything. I mean, you're always supposed to, apparently.
Yeah, you get like the photos and stuff.
But yeah, like you do the altars and everything.
We've seen those. So. Those are super cool.
Yeah. Those are rad.
Yeah, Walter Bricaire actually talks extensively about how Triakas, part of this portion of the Odyssey explains part of where Triakas, the tradition, came from. This idea that the dead could remember once per month who they were when you gave them these offerings, so it's so important that you make sure to do that. And that's actually a practice that I myself do every month. On the dark of the moon, I set the altar, the table, and such. And there's a special ritual that is done, at least in the modern day, beforehand, where you do a cleansing and you do prayers and stuff before you start preparing the meal, and then you do them just before you start consuming it, and pour out a libation at the end. Which is as close as we can get to reconstructing the actual traditions. But what's interesting about ancient Greek practices like that is most of the way we find out about this stuff is actually through these stories. Generally, the scholars in ancient Greece and the philosophers would say in the old way or in the traditional way when referring to practices because it was assumed that everybody knew.
That makes sense. Yeah. I feel like that sort of explains a lot of, why that phrase is used so often. But it does make sense. Sort of like with pretty much anything that you can just sort of yada, yada, yada away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're not going to explain in detail that somebody flushes a toilet after they use a bathroom in a novel. It's just a given in our culture, right?
Right. Yeah. Or it's like the 3 shells. No? Nothing? Demolition Man? No? All right.
Didn't know that. I didn't catch that one. Man.
What?
I didn't catch that one. That's the early 90s version too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes.
But yeah.
That's back in their prime, whatever that was.
Whenever that was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Let's see. I have my thing that's highlighted is further down the page, so
Yeah. I really like there's Barterman, because we're technically referring to him instead of the whole thing.
Just call him Bart.
Bart.
That's what I do.
Thank you. He says that the sort of the overarching point is that the afterlife is not life per se, but it's just a minor stunted version of existence, sort of. He pulls a quote from Achilles. He says that it's where the senseless, burnt out wraiths of mortals make their home, which that is. It's just like you were saying. It's just so that translation is just so poetic. It's gorgeous. It really is.
Whoa.
Yeah. What'd you do?
The internet.
Uh-oh. Are we laggy?
No, you guys have not lagged on my end at all.
Well, that's
good. Yeah.
That's good.
I can see we'll see.
Bart goes into a detailed description of Odysseus offering a black lamb and a bunch of ghosts kind of coming up from the river and trying to drink from it and him having to fight them off with swords, which the suggestion being that there's some physicality to them, but not as much as, say, you or I, until eventually Tiresias comes up and, gets to drink the blood himself and starts to spout a bunch of prophecies.
Nice.
He talks about Polyphemus and the blinding of Polyphemus and how he pissed off Poseidon. with that and how that's going to be a problem for him later. He also, love the beautiful big words that Airman uses, prognosticates an absolute disaster that could come from a different divine source and later does. If the companions of Odysseus, out of desperation, eat the cattle dear to the sun god Helios, they will incur his irreversible laugh and be slaughtered down to a man. Moreover, even though Odysseus will survive and return home, he will find a completely fraught situation. His palace will be filled with his wife Penelope's suitors, hoping he has died, desperate for her hand, and eating her out of house and home while she decides whom to choose.
Yeah. Man.
Damn.
And of course, all of these things end up coming to pass, as anybody who's read the story knows.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Of course it does. And I feel like I wrote down somewhere, where did it go? That it sort of boils down to the fact that Circe, is that how you say that?
I mean, I say
Circe, sort of could have saved Odysseus the whole trip.
Yeah.
But was just like,
he had to experience it, you know?
Yeah, he had to actually go through it. Like,
yeah.
She could have just told him all of the stuff.
Yeah, it's the trials of the heroes, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
It is like a trope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That I imagine probably started with the Odyssey.
Man. But talking about his mom, though, was like, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So right after he talks to Tiresias, his mother comes up and gets to drink from the blood herself. And the two quotes that we get from this, again, are both very beautiful. This translation really does preserve the gorgeousness of the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and runs up to his mom, you know, and like, oh yeah, the
oh yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, just sifting away like a shadow, dissolving like a dream, and each time the grief cut to the heart sharper.
That's so like
to point out, whoever the hell wrote this? 100%. Like
the translation.
Yeah,
well,
whoever translation
wrote it.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about like in hashtag in the beginning. Whoever was the genesis of this.
Well, and then we get another, like, he cries out, he's hurt that his mother is now an eidolon, and we get a reply from Anticlea, my son, the luckiest man alive, this is no deception sent by Queen Persephone, this is just the way of mortals when we die. Since sinews no longer bind flesh and bones together, the fire in all its fury burns the body down to ashes. Once life swifts away from the white bones, and the spirit, rustling, flitters away, flown like a dream.
Flitters is such a good word just to describe, like, I feel like that really captures the essence of what they're getting across with, like, this idea of the afterlife. Like, I feel like that's it's very appropriate.
Yeah.
So that kudos to Robert Fagel. Something like that.
I think so.
And you get the feeling that this ancient author really wanted to drive the point home, which Plato later takes issue with in some of his commentary on the Iliad and the Odyssey. But he calls up one final spirit, and that's Achilles himself. And he, Bart Ehrman describes as the most memorable and moving words of the entire chapters. No winning words about death to me, shining Odysseus. By God, I would rather slave on earth for another man, some dirt-poor tenant farmer who scrapes to keep alive, than rule down here over all the breathless dead.
Man, I read that, like, straight up. The way I read that, man.
It's heavy.
Yeah. Like, I was sitting there going, because he was the dude from Pirates of the Caribbean in the movie, right? Achilles. Who played Achilles in that film with Brad Pitt?
Didn't
No, he wasn't Brad. That wasn't Achilles.
And Troy?
He was Hercules, just some shit.
No, I thought Brad Pitt played Achilles.
No, he wasn't Achilles. Thought it was dude with black hair.
Are you Googling it?
Of course I am.
I thought it was the guy. I thought it was the dude with the arrows in Lord of the Rings. Wow, I'm not coming up with names right now.
Well, Orlando Bloom is in it.
Yeah, I thought
Brad Pitt as Achilles.
Oh, he plays. Yeah, okay.
Orlando Bloom plays Paris.
Yes.
There it is. Yeah.
There we go.
You got to choose between the two, man, or three, I think.
Eric Bana.
Yeah.
Man.
But like, I am mad. Like when I was so I didn't. In my mind, it was Orlando Bloom. So congratulations, you're now Achilles.
Retcon.
Yeah, I'm just this is my imagination, and you know what, I'm gonna do it. And it was
if
just
we ever
like,
make Secular Literary Circle merch, it's just going to be like headcanon, and it'll be Orlando Bloom, and nobody will get it except for the people who've been watching us from the beginning.
Exactly.
I love it.
But he's like yelling at him, being like, "Not for me," And he says, but the fact that he calls him Shining Odysseus too, because he's still alive.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So it's like this difference in like the essence of it. It's like, oh.
But he's very much like, by God, I'd rather be a slave. Just I don't know how it's possible to have like that kind of emotion when you're dead and a wispy, flittering away thingy. But
he drank the blood, so he got his personality back. Remember,
right.
That's the same as his mother. He doesn't get his body back, but he gets his personality back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, let me come back, Achilles. I mean, Odysseus. Honestly,
that one.
I get mixed up.
They are basically interchangeable. That's correct.
But I don't know how he goes on to talk about like there are exceptions and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is Achilles not an exception?
Because according to the ancient author who we now identify as Homer, basically if you've got divine parentage or like the extreme love of a god, then maybe you might get out of it, but otherwise you're screwed. So Heracles gets the fate of having his own place in the afterlife where he gets to preserve himself because he's half god.
Well, and he gets like Heracles gets like basically the two versions, right? Did I understand that correctly? Like he has like the part that has to do with his mortal side, that's just sort of the wisp side, and then he has like the part that has to do with his divine side. Yeah. That's like feasts and stuff.
Yeah, that's like I can't go to Olympus and whatnot, but I'd rather be down here with like my little my wife anyways.
So he's in like the two places at once, basically.
Yeah, which seems impossible, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not Greek. I'm not God.
I'm not God.
A God. I don't know. I think he actually mentions that too. He's like, there's no mention of how that could happen.
Yeah.
But showing up, there's Heracles hanging out. Half of them's like, yeah, and half of them's like, oh. So.
Well, and the other half, like the other person who gets that is Menelaus, who we have a quote from the sea god Proteus, which is, but about your own destiny, Menelaus, dear to Zeus, it is not for you to die, and to meet your fate in the stallion land of Argos. No, the deathless ones will sweep you off to the world's end, the Elysian fields where golden-haired Rhadamanthus waits, where life glides on immortal ease for mortal man, no show, no winter onslaught, nor a downpour there, but night and day the ocean river sends up breathes, singing winds of the west, refreshing all of mankind, which, by the way, the winds of the west was translated as the name of the god there, because there was kind of this interesting duality with the winds. We'll talk about that later. All of this because you are Helen's husband now, the gods count you the son-in-law of Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically have a person with divine parentage and a person who married into a divine family, and they're the people who get to go to the Elysian fields, according to Homer. Very bleak stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's very much, like, exceptional circumstances.
Bunch of elitist Greeks.
Yeah.
Man. Freaking avocado Greeks. You know what I'm saying?
Avocado Greeks?
Yeah, they avocado toast and whatnot. Avocado Greeks. Elitist Greeks.
Oh, okay, I see what you
gotta
did
get
there.
married into like a god family or something.
See what you did
Thanks.
there. Yeah, but he goes on to point out, like, so there's like basically pretty much everybody is like in the meh stage, but then there's the ones who are like super unlucky.
Yeah.
Which is particularly if you did not get the proper burial rites.
Yeah. These things aren't even your fault.
Right. It's like a Elpenor. Is that how you say that one?
Yeah, Elpenor.
Elpenor, yeah. So we're gonna Susan this for a second. He was one of Odysseus's men who basically drank himself into a stupor and ended up on Circe's roof, where he jumped off and broke his neck. That wasn't very smart. When Odysseus encounters him during his journey, Elpenor basically begs Odysseus to give him a proper funeral so he can get out of that like no man's land, because that place where they're stuck is like a sort of like a limbo where it's just
You have your full awareness of yourself, and your existence, but you still can't feel things. Which, you know, in a way, the whole plight of the Eidolons, it sucks that they lose their sense of self until they're fed on Triakas, but at the same time, how much worse would it be that you are immaterial and can still remember your humanity? It's almost a, you know, at least in the Homeric view, it's almost a, you know, kindness that people forget who they are when they drink of the waters of Styx.
Yeah. It's like, it seems like it would be. That would be far preferable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Kill. That was
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, like the words that Elpenor cries out are just as beautifully written. I beg you, don't sail off and desert me, left behind unwept, unburied. Don't, or my curse may draw God's fury on your head. No, burn me in full armor, all my harness, heap my mound by the churning grey surf, perform my rites, and plant on my tomb that oar I swung with my mates when I rode among the living.
He's just so like
amazing.
He's pleading and he's desperate. He's just like, get me out of here. Like, help me as much as you can.
I think it ends up that he does. I don't remember the Odyssey, but I think that he ends up doing that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, man, like, go back and bury my body.
Yeah.
And this, of course, you know, has to do with like Greek burial rites and stuff like that. And I get that. And I was just like, man.
Yeah.
Which shows even more how a lot of these stories were meant not as literal accounts of historical fact, but as teaching tools. You get this idea of, like, from this story alone, you get the idea of, you know, how important the rites of Triakas are, because if you don't put that bowl of blood out, if you don't put out that, you know, that feast for your ancestors, they are going to not only forget who they are, but continue to suffer in that forgetfulness versus giving them this respite once per month in this joyful way. And by the way, if you don't bury your loved ones at all, they'll be stuck where they can't even do that. They can't go to this realm where they're no longer suffering. They're just going to stay there. So it emphasized in Greek culture how important these rites of the dead were.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it seems like that's sort of the closest thing, like the description of that limbo is sort of the closest thing we get to like the precursor to the Christian hell, like the modern ideas of the Christian hell.
Purgatory for
like,
what's his face?
Yeah.
It's Elpenor gets a little purgatory action.
Yeah.
Until somebody goes, basically prays him into heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Orthodox Catholic thing, and then then there's the other part here where Odysseus sees these three beings that are like, oh yeah, you think these guys have it bad that they can't feel? It could be worse.
They are the only ones that are. Oh yeah, Kill, I totally agree. It really, really did. Yeah. So there's the three of them are the Titan Titius. I'm always gonna look to you. I'm always gonna look to you, Leah, to make sure I'm saying something right. So there's Titios.
Yeah.
So Titios tried to rape the goddess Leto and ends up with, splayed out in a field with vultures munching on his liver for all eternity. So that's always fun. Then there's Tantalus, who sacrificed his own son as a meal to the gods. Is that the same? How does that differ? The one that Tantalus sacrificed his son in the meal to the gods. What exactly was that one for?
So the idea of that, it's an illustration of human or human-like meat and blood is actually, so I have to get into a description of the concept of miasma. Miasma is this sort of spiritual dirt that happens just from being human. So like defecating causes miasma, birth causes miasma, death causes miasma. The idea in Greek thought being that we are those who look like the gods and think like the gods. We are the only animals endowed with mind, kind of similar to like the way that some Christians say humans are unique because we're the only ones with souls. That comes from the Greek idea that, you know, humans are similar enough to the gods that we are separated from beasts, because beast blood is actually actually sacred. Human blood is actually miasmic because we are not the gods. We are not equal to them, but we are not beasts either. And so that story is illustrative as to why the Greeks did not condone human sacrifice, because our blood is miasmic, and actually murdering somebody outside of the fog of war, where Achilles actually protects you from the miasmic quantities of blood, like murdering somebody outside of war, there was a very deep and detailed descriptions of the rituals and things you would have to do in order to get that miasma off you. Like, ordinary birth and death could be cleansed with holy water and such at temple rites, but when it came to, like, actual murder, that was the most heinous thing. It was the closest to the Greek concept of sin that you could get, other than maybe hubris.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's where that story comes from.
Yeah. So Daedalus for eternity is kept just out of reach of food and water. So it's like if you're super thirsty and super hungry all at the same time, you see it right there and you just can't get it. Yeah, that's his eternity. And then everybody, well, most people know about Sisyphus, the one who is condemned to roll the boulder up the hill for all of eternity, and then it falls back down, and then he has to roll it back uphill. I actually discovered right before I left DFW that there is a sculpture of Sisyphus in one of the conference rooms in our office.
Huh.
And I was the only person to notice, oh my God, that's Sisyphus. And everyone's like, wait, who's that? And I'm like, oh, come on. So what was it that Sisyphus did to get that punishment? I didn't write it down.
I'd have to actually remember what it was that he did.
I did not write it down.
I want to say he was the one who tricked the gods into taking the bones and fat as offerings, but I might be wrong.
That's right. He captured death.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, he captured death. Yeah, no, the one who tricked the bone, the one who tricked the gods was Prometheus. He also stole fire.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Look here, there. Sisyphus. Not even Thanos can trick death, bro. So.
Well, he didn't just trick him. He captured him and locked him up, which stopped people from dying, which was a major upset to things. Because the gods don't want humans to be immortal.
Yeah. But I mean...
Because then they'd be on the same level.
Death is, again, one of those things that separates us from the gods.
The joke's never going to land.
What about Thanos, babe?
Nothing.
I want to hear it. No, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
No, it's not. No, I was just saying. I'm just making the offhanded comment about Thanos and death.
Oh, he can't cheat death.
Yeah.
I heard it earlier. I get
that. Okay.
But one could argue that he wanted to sleep with death. So what's the? It depends on whether you're talking about the comics or the movies, I guess.
He wanted to marry death, and death was like, "Nah, I ain't interested." He was like, "Ah, I'm a Titan, slamity slam, and let me go and try and impress death and murder half the fucking universe."
Seems about right.
Yeah, and then he meets Squirrel Girl. That's a parody it's a Christmas parody, but it's still my favorite one. So
or Ant-Man.
That's just a
that's
a guy on Reddit.
That's just a meme. Anyway.
Yeah, they are being forced to make never-ending atonement in the afterlife for that they had done while living. They will become the prototypes of hell as it develops later in Western traditions. Yeah. And there is nothing in life that is deserving of eternal punishment. So fuck you, Greek people, for helping to create that nonsense.
Yeah.
Part of it, though, is none of them were human, if I recall correctly. They were all semi-divine beings of some kind. So
I know.
Like, there's no stories, as far as I know, of humans being punished like that, other than, like, Hades punishing somebody by not letting them come back to life when they were invited to in a different story because he was an asshole to Persephone. But
makes sense.
So we get into this section where he talks about the influence of Homer on the average populace, which I initially had a kind of very negative reaction to, just because, again, there were many Greek conceptualizations of the afterlife over a long period of time, particularly from various philosophical schools, but there was also the same kind of nastiness toward philosophers in ancient Greece that there is today, which is philosophy is useless and blah, 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 blah. So whether you can, like, I think Bard Ehrman is actually right here about the fact that, to a certain degree, Homer was extremely influential in ancient Greece in terms of people's ideas of the afterlife, and early Christians had a very hard time convincing people out of it. But it would be remiss of me not to mention that the Platonists actually took the idea of the Elysian Fields and expanded on it majorly throughout their development of their particular line. They believed actually that human shades, eidolons, if you were an awesome enough person in life, you could transcend your humanness and either become a daemon, which is like a demigod spirit type thing, or you could end up in the Elysian Fields if you were awesome enough to be remembered throughout eternity to hang out with Heracles and Alexander the Great and people like that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then you have the Stoics. The Stoics actually believed that there was no afterlife whatsoever, that effectively what happened was all of nature, every atom, everything that exists, human and non-human, is part of the Godhead. Think like Gaia theory. And when you die, your soul and energy just returns to that. They think that humans are of the fire aspect, which, if you get into the earth, air, fire, water, spirit thing, like that whole thing actually comes from the Greeks. So the Stoics had their own version of that, and human souls were of the fire aspect. And that's the Stoic theology. Epicureans also said not to concern themselves. Whoops, I accidentally clicked that. They also talked about not concerning yourself with an afterlife. They didn't believe there was one at all, like shade or otherwise, and so they espoused this idea of almost hedonism, like basically enjoying yourself and living absolutely to the fullest. It's a lot more complex than just plain hedonism is, but that's effectively their idea. So there were lots of different conceptualizations. This was just one of the most popular ones because the Homeric epics were basically bedtime tales. Practically everybody knew them. They were often put into plays. Like, these were the bedrock myths, so to speak, that everybody was taught from a young age.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It would have been nice if Bart would have included the other stuff, but you only got so many pages, I guess.
So, how do you... Aeneas? Is that how you say that one?
Yeah, or Aeneas.
Aeneas, okay. There's a lot of similarities between what's in Aeneas and what's in the Homeric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some differences between them that Ehrman does point out. There's it sort of goes into a lot of the similar stories to stuff we've already covered with I just hit myself in the head with Odysseus and stuff. I did like the mention of Cerberus.
Yeah,
I did like that.
I'm right by him on the sticks.
Yeah.
Well, cross sticks. And met him like, yo, Cerberus, what up, bro? Or, what up?
Imagine Cerberus as
Rods.
a puppy. Would have been cute. Where's my notes here? Oh God, what did I do? What did I do with the rest of that? I don't know what I did with the rest of that.
So we were getting to talking about like the Aeneid and some of the differences between it and the stories that were told earlier. Particularly the Trojan horse is actually something that a lot of people think is in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's not. It's from the Aeneid.
Right. Yeah. And also, I guess the bunny from Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail. Anyway.
True. That's where it is.
I mean, that's obviously a direct reference to the Trojan horse. Obviously. It is.
Yeah.
Don't judge me.
It talks about Enos going to visit Cybele, who was a famous sort of prophetess / sorceress. She's semi-divine, blessed. I believe she was blessed by the god Apollon. So we get a description from the Aeneid. Suddenly her features, all her color changes, her braided hair flies loose and her breast heaves, her heart bursts with frenzy. She seems to rise in height, the ring of her voice no longer human, the breath, the power of the gods comes closer, closer.
That is one heck of a possession.
Yeah, she got all
One heck
like
of an influence.
I like erotic and shit. Good for
Just
you
the
there.
word breast.
I mean, no, she got all like red in the chest and everything.
Her braided hair.
Yeah, straight up was just like.
That's legit.
Yeah.
That's legit.
Man, and she's like, "Hey, I'm nice."
Yeah.
Well, and this is an important point to mention that Virgil was Roman, not Greek, which is why you get Diana and not Selene or Artemis as the mention here. For some reason, they didn't really translate Apollon, but they did translate Diana into like a Roman deity. So she tells him to pray, and then starts to prophesy because he wants to go to the realm of the dead.
And she tells him like exactly how.
So many like that's a common trope. I want to go. Don't go see dead people.
Right. It's like no. I want to go see like people that I have lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is a common, like that's a very human thing.
Yeah, all you had to do is read the Odyssey. You'd have known.
Well, and she says, Man of Troy, the descent to the underworld is easy. Night and day, the gates of shadowy death stand open wide. But to retrace your steps, to climb back to the upper air, there the struggle, the labor lies. Only a few loved by impartial Jove or borne aloft to the sky by their fiery virtue, some sons of the gods have made their way. But she instructs him on what to do to undertake the journey to the underworld, and these are instructions. There is the entryway, the gorge of hell itself, grief and the pangs of conscience make their beds. The fatal, pale disease lives there in bleak old age, dread and hunger, seductress to crime and grinding poverty, all terrible shapes to see, and death and deadly struggle, war, raging strife.
Yeah, that is.
You ain't coming back, basically. You know,
or they're obviously gonna make it very, very difficult.
Yeah, you can, good luck. Yeah. I'll be with you, so I hope you make it.
So Enos sees his one of the companions that he had, Polynorus. I'm always gonna ask you. Polynorus. This follows the same trope as Elpenor. What did I miss?
I said it's not shit. That's not how she said it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at pronunciations.
Yeah, me too.
Which this follows very, very similarly to Elpenor in that he didn't get the burial rites that he should have. So he's like, hey, could you please give me my burial rites? Because I'm never going to actually be allowed to cross the river and actually enter the realm of the dead. So luckily, it's prophesied that he's actually going to be buried. So he's like, okay, that's good. It's sort of like the, what am I thinking of? When somebody tells you everything's going to be okay, and you're like, okay, maybe it is.
She basically comforts him by telling him he's going to get what he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
So I still love Cerberus. Still do.
And this is where we get our first glimpse of this idea of reward and punishments in a more mainstream story beyond, say, what Plato talks about or what his later, like Iamblichus and some of the later contemporaries of, or later, I guess, students in his school kind of talk about. The Aeneid is one of the first myths where we start to talk about rewards and punishments and death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's some of the ideas of it, like there's Enos and the Sibyl. I never know how to say it. Sibyl. Sibyl. Thank you. They come to this fork in the road where, to the right, you've got this like eternal happiness, but to the left, it says the left-hand path torments, the wicked leading down to Tartarus, path to doom.
Which is interesting because that's a Roman interpretation of Tartaros. Tartaros originally was just sort of this pit in the ground that Zeus cast the Titans into when he took everything over to punish them for being shitheads to the gods, effectively.
Nice.
And to stop them from fucking with humanity eventually when we came about. So this is a very Roman interpretation of Tartaros kind of being this torture chamber, because really it's just described as a deep, dark pit in myths leading up to this.
Yeah, it like builds on that idea. So it's like, oh, okay. It's sort of, it makes it a little bit more ominous and stuff.
Well, but what's interesting, though, is contrary, like Ehrman points out, contrary to what a modern reader might expect, this flaming river is not the place of torment. It is a burning moat to prevent escape from the fortress. The tormented have no choice but to remain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, wow. That is a good way to make somebody stay.
Fire?
Yes.
I mean, if you're dead, does it really matter?
I mean,
That's what I got out of that.
Can you still feel the pain though?
I don't know. Am I Greek or Roman?
Roman in this case.
Then no. I think it's no to both of them.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's something I don't understand about like the hell thing too. You know, like the Christian version. You can't hurt me. I'm already dead. But
it's true.
Yeah, and of course, but there is a gate though. So as we all know, walls are incapable of being climbed, and that's why we have a lot of them on the southern border, and nobody ever gets over them. So massive that it can be moved by no one, not even the gods. Okay, question mark. How is it put there then?
Maybe the materials were placed there by the gods, but they can't move the whole thing?
I don't know. It never says it. You know, it's plot hole.
I'm entirely speculating.
I don't know.
I mean, it could have been that the Titans put it there.
Ooh, that's true.
Isn't one of the Titans in hell? Wait, no.
Well,
Eternal.
No, all of
that's
the
a
Titans,
different.
all of the Titans are now in Tartaros, but they could have been put there before they were cast into Tartaros.
Hmm.
That's true.
Because again, the Titans were the parents of the gods.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So up on the actual top of the gate, I love how I'm so like expressive today, like with the arms.
Me too.
So there's this high tower where one of the three divine fates keeps watch over the entrance.
We don't entirely be called the Morai.
Morai. Ooh, that's good. That is interesting. I like it. That sounded sarcastic. That was not sarcastic. So we don't entirely know what's happening within the chamber. But what Aeneas hears from the distance should strike terror in the heart. Groans resound from the depths, the savage crack of the lash, the grating creak of iron, the clank of dragging chains.
So it's basically Christmas Story, right? With
Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol, yeah, sorry, wrong one. With you know, Scrooge's like buddy comes back.
Cratchit.
I don't know, right? A ratchet old Cratchit dude, and he's got like chains and shit.
Yeah.
It's the same concept.
I mean, exactly the same.
Got it.
I don't see the difference.
And I guess, well, he can come back. You know, he's ethereal or whatever. You know, ethereal. I can't say the word, but yeah. And
Virgil turns this into a teaching moment through Aeneas. He asks, you know, Sybil, why is this happening? And she explains that no pure soul can go to this place. Rhadamanthus, the divine judge of the Underworld, which again, this is Roman, not Greek, with an iron hand, censuring people, exposing fraud, forcing confessions when anyone up above, revealing his hidden crimes, puts off his day of atonement till he dies the fool too late.
Man,
yeah,
gotta confess your shit, man.
Right? Gotta get right with the gods beforehand. Don't try and, you know,
beg forgiveness, basically.
Right.
So we have hatred of brothers, killing of fathers, fraud, avarice, adultery, breaking of oaths, treason, and incest as all being crimes that are listed of if you haven't made atonement for them before you die, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Killing, okay, so I haven't, oh man, I definitely have broken an oath. I don't know that it's like an oath like Greek's oath type, yeah, I'm just, you know.
Well, breaking of oaths.
I was going to do something.
Well, I don't know about in ancient Rome because, again, I don't practice Religio Romana. There's a distinct difference between the Roman conceptualization of Greek deities and the Greek conceptualization. There's a huge difference in the way that they thought. There's obviously a lot of appropriation between the two. But, like, when you study it, again, the Romans had this conceptualization, the Greeks didn't. Mm-hmm. So, at least not in mainstream Greek thought. But for oaths, generally, this refers to, when you're talking about breaking Horkos oath, you're talking about oaths to the gods. Basically, the big thing was swearing an oath on the river Styx or swearing the oath in a name of a god. Usually it would be recorded on a tablet and then broken. That's the kind of oath breaking that they're talking about. Like, if you're that serious for a contract or something else, you would do that and you'd be fucked if you broke it because that god would come after you.
Right. It's sort of similar to the Christian idea of selling your soul to the devil for something here on earth.
Yeah. So I'm good then.
Like,
I haven't done any of that stuff. I'm all right. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I don't have to hunger to know their doom. What form of torture or twist of fortune drags them down? Some trundle enormous boulders, others dangle, racked to the breaking point on the spokes of rolling wheels.
That sounds miserable.
Yeah, you get dizzy as shit. And man, I'm glad I'm not one of them. Woo.
Well, what's I guess a little bit worse, slightly different, but slightly worse. So Sibyl reveals that there's actually like a shit ton of crimes and like sins, quote unquote, and actual punishments that measure up with it. No, not if I had 100 tongues and 100 mouths and a voice of iron too. I could never capture all the crimes or run through all the torments, doom by doom. That's such a good word, doom.
Yeah, so much we should make it a doctor. And yeah, I appreciate the Apocalypse of Peter more than this one at that point, because he's very, very specific about it. Right?
On like the actual like punishments.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was hoping that everyone would get into. You know, like in those, like, man, because the Apocalypse of Peter is phenomenal, and it actually has to do it's today's version of hell.
Yeah,
and in here it's very much it seems like it's like romanticized. You know, of course it is Roman, but in like the instead of like actually providing these examples for examples, it's more of a, you know, just be a good person, you'll be fine type stuff.
Well, this is like, I feel like there's that vagity to it that's on purpose. It's sort of like, you know, it's just like with, I think it was it 2 weeks ago that we were talking about the braided hair? Was that the first episode? Braided hair and the women being hung by their hair.
Oh yeah, it was the first episode. Yeah.
There's a lot of the stuff that's left so vague that it's like you fill in those blanks and you're like, oh my God, if this is happening to these people, what is, you know, an appropriate punishment for these things that I've done while I'm here on Earth?
Yeah, like it's kind of like you know, like with the coronavirus thing, right? Like if people like, oh, you start thinking, oh shit, wait, do I have this? Is this me? Am I going to do this? Am I going to get this? You know?
And then you start convincing yourself that
and then you get paranoid as shit. That's a real thing, by the way. And I could certainly, because there's enough like vagity. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I can see that too. Huh?
Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah, well, got it from you.
Thank you.
So
and then
yeah. So we end up kind of departing away from this, you know, horrendous sort of afterlife to a very pretty description of the Elysian fields, which we're promptly reminded the souls there, even though they're getting to do some awesome stuff, they still don't have a physical existence.
No.
But we get this gorgeous description. They gained the land of joy, the fresh green fields, the fortunate groves where the blessed make their homes. Here a freer air, dazzling radiance clothes the fields, and the spirits possess their own sun, their own stars. And we get into descriptions of feasting and frolicking and how the spirits themselves don't have a fixed place where they live. They get to live by the groves or by the ocean or wherever they damn well please, basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just like, we're doing what we want.
Yeah.
Because we can.
Like he said, settle on pillowed banks and meadows washed with brooks.
Sounds very relaxing.
Yeah, it's like it's very much springtime to me.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, except springtime is like a life thing. And so, you know, and he goes, and yet, which thank you so much, Bart, for that. Ambiguities that are hard to explain. Like Odysseus's sword, which we didn't mention earlier, can.
No, we did.
Oh, okay, sorry, yeah. I forgot. And it can ward off spirits, even though it can't hurt them.
Right.
In this case, he says, the souls feasting and playing sport have no physical existence. And then it goes to, much like what we had previous with Odysseus, this Aeneas sees his father. And it's like, man.
Yeah.
Again, you get that,
it hits you right in the heart because it appeals to that whole like you've lost someone and it's sort of like when you dream about somebody that has died. It's so similar to that where it's like you reach out and you try to touch them and you can talk to them and have a conversation with them, but it's not like it's ultimately fruitless.
Yeah, and it's just
which is the way that Urban puts it.
Yeah, he does. He says, like Odysseus before him, he makes 3 fruitless attempts to embrace his parent, who is dead, and it's just 3 times he embraced nothing. The phantom sifting through his fingers, light as wind, quick as a dream in flight. Just, first off, beautiful poetry. Secondly, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that also underscores how important touch is to us as humans, right? Like, he can talk to, he can see this person he hasn't spoken to, and yet it's so heartbreaking that they can't touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in a similar vein, it's, when, like I was saying with the, dreaming of somebody that has died, it's, it's something that not everybody experiences, that whole, like, dreaming about someone that has passed away that you really, really cared about.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Those are hard dreams to have.
Yeah.
Those are really hard dreams to have. Like, speaking from complete personal experience.
Same.
So it's like,
yeah.
Yeah, those are hard. It's very similar.
As it says, Virgil departs from Homer by introducing an innovation. Most of the souls in the underworld are destined to live again.
Woo!
He endorses, as Ehrman says, endorses the idea of reincarnation.
Which means that those being tortured in that underworld area that are imprisoned there, they might get another chance at another life.
Yeah.
It's not an eternal torture. It's a torture for a certain amount of time, and then you might get another chance to live again.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, they have to go through stuff in order to do it. Which I think is worth it,
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, it's worth it for, as his father tells him that these are the spirits owed a second body by the fates. They are allowed to drink from the river lake. Yep. And which means forgetfulness. And basically you get previous life amnesia and are set free from their cares. But before that can happen, they have to pay for the sins they committed in their bodies. And it reads it, and I imagine one of you will do that. But again, worth it to me.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what happened before, and so you might end up elsewhere. You could be a shitty person. But these things that they have to go through here, where they have to, like, basically stand there and go through, like, these painful things for this much time. It's kind of like one of those things where you're sitting in a room having to listen to somebody, like, talk about a book for an hour or something, and it's like, oh my God, will this ever fucking end? Seriously.
And then it ends.
And yeah, and then and it's over with, and you're like, wow, that was
not that bad.
It's the same thing as this, where it's like, you're talking an eternity for them, right?
Right.
Where I'd be like, done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put me on the rack.
I think it's worth it.
Well, and it's such a more fair way to look at it. Like, I'll read the description here. It says, and so the souls are drilled in punishments. They must pay for their old offenses. Some are hung, splayed out, exposed to the empty winds. Some are plunged into the rushing flood. Their stains, their crimes, scoured off or scorched away by fire. Each of us must suffer his own demanding ghost. Then we are sent to Elysium's broad expanse. The few of us even hold these fields of joy, till the long days, the cycle of time seen through, cleanse our hard, inveterate stains and leave us clear, ethereal sense, the eternal breath of fire, purged and pure. So the idea being that no matter how much you fucked up, you can have this stuff scoured from you, get to enjoy this little bit of joy for a little while before you're sent back out and you're forced to drink from the water and get to try again. So it's a much more fair view, I would say, than heaven and hell, even though, again, this isn't the Greek view, this is very much the Roman. This idea that it is a limited torment and a limited joy, and ultimately you get to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the true joy is going back.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if you don't know.
Yeah.
Even if you, if you wake up, And obviously the reincarnation story here is quite a bit different than other certain Eastern religions, but the waking up from who knows, and you don't remember, but then you get the idea. You got to, if you've done goof before, you have another chance to do better. But even then, you don't know if you've done goofed,
right?
And so you might up again. You might
do the
just
same thing.
You might just go and do like a Stalin or something. Don't recommend, by the way.
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah, and and because then the other religions might be true, and you might come back as like a rat, and or worse, a spider. And yeah, I really appreciate the way, and of course, the way that it's written in there, and the beauty of this poetry too. I'll be honest. It'd be nice if reincarnation was a thing.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is Ehrman does actually, in this last section, the invention of heaven and hell, he talks about how the Aeneid differed so much because eventually of Plato. And that's what the entire next chapter is about. It's about Plato's conceptualization of the afterlife and a lot of the political problems that were going on in Greece and first century Rome that sort of led up to the Aeneid being what it was, because there were a lot of problems in society at that time. And so this idea of punishments, of the wicked getting to be wicked their entire lives and then not facing problems until death, it doesn't matter how awesome your life was or how many crimes you got away with, you're going to have to suffer. That appealed to thinkers like Plato.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Kale said something in the chat, because I was sitting here and I was going, this is what dreams may come. That is what this is. And I know you don't want to say Robin Williams now because obviously, but it's like, that's what that whole fucking movie was.
What Dreams May Come is brutal. Like, that movie made me cry harder than anything else I've ever watched in my entire life. Just like, who needs a fucking heart? Just get rid of it. Throw it out the window. Throw it up. Step on it. I don't care. I don't need it no more. I don't want to cry this hard ever again.
Don't watch A Dog's Purpose then. By the way, I didn't either because I know. There's a corgi in that film.
Oh, or Marley and Me. Don't watch Marley and Me.
There's a corgi in the other film, right?
That's more.
And the dogs like talk and stuff too. Oh man.
Anthropomorphized.
Yeah. Oh, and they're all like, none of them are like raspy old voices or anything. They're all like the voices you'd want to hear.
Oh.
Like make you feel good about things. And yep.
Yep.
But this, he says that thinkers came to believe that no one can live a life of sin, right? I think you mentioned that actually already. I was reading the bottom one, my bad. But yeah, you will get your just rewards.
Or just desserts.
Yes. And which, by the way, eternal punishment is not, it's not just,
No, it's overkill.
It's like eternity. You only gave me like 60 of these or some shit. And I got to do eternity. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it's interesting how going into this, we're in a book called Heaven and Hell, A History of the Afterlife, and almost everything we've discussed so far has been pagan. Like, we talked about the Apocrypha, but we've mostly been talking about Greece and Rome, and next chapter is going to be even more about Greece and Rome. We're talking about Plato.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. And I'm
excited for chapter 4.
Yeah, and that's partially because, spoiler, Jesus didn't preach heaven and hell. So,
that's true.
Yeah. And I look forward to getting to that in the book. I have not actually yet. I'm just letting folks know that wasn't something Jesus preached. That wasn't something that his disciples did either. And so this is a newer invention. And I'm excited to see where it actually kind of, what Bart kind of has to say about that. So next week, good old Plato, man.
So
I think it's going to be good.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you, Divine Disbelief, for helping create this series, because we had a bigger audience than we've had basically since our first episode, which has been really, really nice. But it's also really interesting to kind of go through these stories and talk about what they meant culturally, because a lot of us are familiar with the Iliad and the Odyssey, and some with the Aeneid, but most of us don't think about, like, the way that, say, Christians studied Bible verses. There was something very similar done in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where these stories were meant as teaching tools about why certain things are done a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think that this has been a fantastic book to go through to kind of talk about some of that stuff.
Yes, I'm very glad this first one is so readable.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Pretty soon we're going to piss off the Christians, though, so...
By the way, at the end of Dr. Joss's interview earlier today, he gave a bunch of suggestions for books about biblical law and about like history of things like slavery and the laws governing women. And so I was joking with him that some of those sounded like they might be readable enough to end up on one of our vote lists for this particular series, because he gives like 10, I think it was like 6 or 7 different books that he had suggested at the end of the stream.
Nice.
Yeah. And
I saw briefly him holding one up towards the end.
Yeah, I probably have a couple of them.
Probably.
I have a lot of books. Like she knows. And but no, yes, it's been very, this has been a lot of fun for us too. I don't usually get to talk about this stuff. People usually look at me and they're like, okay, cool, don't care. And so be able to do this and come and, there are 14 people currently watching.
Yes. Which, again, thank y'all.
Yes, don't know
very much.
Yeah, and I hope that all of you are, we're going to try and do our premiere tomorrow night. So,
yeah. That reminded me, you guys need to shell out that premiere, because I was really excited just hearing about what you guys were, working on.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a video that will be premiering tomorrow at what is our usual live stream time, which is 5:30 Pacific.
Which would be
Eastern.
for our Eastern audience. Yeah, that'd be 8:30.
8:30, yeah.
Move to the West Coast.
West Coast, Best Coast. Which I've lived here for 2 months. It's shocking
how many streamers are Easterners. Like, I just auto-translate everything into East Coast time because half of all my friends are East Coasters. It's ridiculous.
Right? Oh, yeah. So we'll have that video premiering. We are hard at work on the remainder of that.
Yeah, we are.
Very close to done. I will be on Women of Atheism Roundtable on Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist on Thursday. So that'll be exciting. Fun. Yeah, that's gonna be fun. I think it's either weekly or monthly. I don't remember which.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And then
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, and Dean Meadows challenged me to a debate today. That was cool.
Another
exciting.
One.
Yeah.
Another one.
I'm confused. And something else. I thought we were doing something. I don't know. Shit, I don't remember. I thought we were doing something else, but we're back here next week. That's fun.
Yeah, we will be back here at 7:30 PST, 10:30 EST. I know for East Coasters it's a little bit of a later show, but I have counseling every other week on Tuesdays, so it's best to just make sure it's later. I've got actually a big announcement and a correction to an earlier announcement. My big announcement is that I'm going to be on Cyrus the Skeptic's channel at 6 p.m. EST, 3 p.m. PST on Friday, talking about the YSEE, which is an anti-Semitic Hellenic hate group. And as I've consistently said, as a Hellenist, I will clean house if there's shitbags in my community, and there's shitbags in our community. We've been working on this collab. Ocean and I have been working on it for over 6 months. Digging up shitty theology and evidence about hate speech from their members and things of that nature. We actually kicked somebody off of Sticks and Stonehenge for being a member of this group and refusing to acknowledge the evidence. So we're going to be revealing a lot of that. I've also got a video in the works on folkism, what it is in the Reconstructionist community and how it's different from religious protectionism in Native American communities. The script is done. I'm working on getting the audio done because, as you guys can hear, I'm in a room that echoes a lot. It's our entertainment room. My desk got moved out of my office, which had sound suppression. It should be sound suppressed by Friday. I hope.
Nice.
Last little bit of an announcement is that the Misha Loves thing that was supposed to happen on Thursday, unfortunately, one of our guests had a scheduling conflict. They had initially told us that they could make it, and then it turns out that they're working on that day. So we're working on setting that up. Knock will be forthcoming on a stream and let you guys know when that's going to happen. The Sticks and Stonehenge video on the Thomas of Tibber controversy, which I talked to you guys about on Saturday, we have it recorded. I'm in the process of editing it. I'm hoping to have it up by the end of the week. So if you guys aren't subscribed to Sticks and Stonehenge, but you were concerned about that, you want to help protect your community, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell over at Sticks and Stonehenge. I will have that video up by the end of the week, and you guys will get to find out what happened and a timeline of how he sexually harassed multiple trans women and groomed a minor for 2 years, and the way that he took advantage of our channel and our silence on why we kicked him in order to do that. So, like, this is a story that needs to be heard. If he tries to find quarter in your community, don't let him. He's going to lie and manipulate, and we're going to talk about the patterns of lies and manipulation he's employed in order to do that.
Why are you pointing at me?
No, sorry. Was that the one you were talking about the other day?
Yeah,
Okay,
I was reading your tweet.
Yeah, that's... Sorry. I did not mean to implicate you in anything. That was because I was making sure.
My God.
Sorry.
My God, anybody comes in right now, they're going to see that. I'd be like, that's not me.
My bad.
So, yeah, no, Shay's pointing up... He actually even harassed Shay on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, that's how bad this got.
No.
So, thank you guys so much for joining us. This one ran a little longer than they usually do. Thank you so much for the 12 of you that stuck through all of it. We had a larger audience than we usually do. I'm glad to see that the show is growing. I'm going to make sure to fix the description. Not kind of forgot about the show and didn't put it up. Like, he took down the one that I had and the description that I had and then kind of hastily put it up. So I'm going to fix the description and get the link to the book and everything there. It's $14.99 for the ebook or $30 for the hardcover. It's a great investment for those of you who haven't read it. And a chapter a week's pretty manageable. We're only 3 chapters in. That's pretty easy to catch up. And at the end of this book, we're going to put up a list of books that we're thinking about doing and let you guys vote. So if you're a part of this first book, you're going to be able to help make, decisions for where the show goes going forward. We very much want this to be a community thing. So if you guys are interested, please, pick up the book, support the publisher. We have the link in the prior 2 episodes directly to the publisher so that the author can get his proper cut rather than most of it going to Amazon. So please consider supporting your authors because, again, like this kind of writing is hard work.
Yes.
And it is.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you again for having us. I'd say that it's great show to have us. We're not even guests. We're on this. This is who we are.
You're officially a co-host.
Yeah.
You're equal to me on this show.
Yay!
Man, just honored. But yeah, we will see everybody first off on our channel tomorrow, 5:30 Pacific. It won't be a live stream. It's going to be a premiere. So I've been waiting on that because we've been talking about it for like a month and a half. And other than that, we will see you guys back here next Tuesday.
Yep.
It's Tears Day.
So thank you guys again for joining us. And remember, be the conversation. The community can come together over things that are better than drama. Let's learn together.